No, no, not quite. I didn't break it. The S9, you were able to crack it open to put on a tablet as well because you have a coil system that is in there. If you crack open the S8 as I have, you'll notice that there's a ribbon cable, and that's why I'm not able to close it normally anymore. I think it used to be folded in a way that because I opened it, it's not closing right. Make sure not do that if you don't want to fall into that situation. I'm probably gonna have to crack it open all together to like fold it again and maybe put some Captain tape. This is a prototype unit that was sent to me by Abxylute. Give you a little bit of my first impressions on using it as a whole and some of the features that it has, and also draw some comparisons to the S9. The buttons, so much like the S9, we have membrane, and that actually feels quite identical between the two, except this time around they're glossy, which I personally prefer. We have Hall effect sticks, select start, your home button, mode button to do like a bunch of different settings on the controller, as well as a capture. D-pad, still tactile like it was the case. You'll notice that this is the module we have underneath, whereas this was the module which was known to have issues when you push very, very hard. So we'll look into that. I don't remember if this does that, but we'll look into it as well. They are working on fixing the D-pad for the final unit just because it's a little stiff. You know, it's easy to maneuver still, but I think they're going to make it a little easier to press. Tactile shoulders, Hall effect triggers, and 2 mappable back buttons. You can use it on a PC using this cable. Some of the massive advantages that you have with going with Abxylute telescopic controllers, they are the most compatible options on the market. And what I mean by that is you have multiple modes. So for example, if I use the S9 as a reference, you'll see here we have the PS mode, the Android mode, X input, Nintendo Switch mode, and then the mapping mode. And you have just as many modes with this one, but one big difference is here you had all these options except the mapping mode, whether you were wired or Bluetooth when supplying power. Whereas here, you don't need to supply power because it has a battery of its own. But when it comes to wired, which you can use here, I was only able to get the X input mode. If there's a shortcut that I don't know about, Abxylute, please let me know. For the time being, you can go PS mode, X input, Android HID, Nintendo Switch mode through Bluetooth, exclusively X input when using the USB-C. We don't have the 3.5mm jack anymore since this is not natively a wired controller. Probably one of the most prominent devices at the time being, which is going to be the Nintendo Switch 2. If I just go ahead and do, I believe it's Y, and yeah, we're going to hold Y in home. Yeah, so I just booted in the Switch mode. It will not wake up the Switch 2. It will work fine on the Switch 2. And so for example, here on Bonanza, I don't know if you guys hear it, the rumble. It's a game that has a lot of rumble, and that showcases, well, let me have you guys hear it. Definitely a big step back is the rumble. We didn't have HD rumble or anything on the S9, but here it is a pretty cheap sounding and vibrating motor that we have. And you can just tell by moving around with Donkey. But as far as the features go, you have everything except, of course, the C button. And if, for example, I grab a rock here, you can see that gyro works just fine. And this is also something that is improved in comparison to the S9. And I'll show you guys in the app a little later. Although I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time playing with the Switch 2, just know that if this is something you'd like to do, that's something you absolutely could do with the Switch 1 as well, by the way. And it does give you a nice grip. It holds very nicely as well on the Switch 2. And if I'm to show you guys, like, you know, I'm really shaking this thing, and it's not getting undone, and no risk for the connector as well. You have this little rubber to the side that are meant to channel audio up if you're using with a cell phone or tablet. So it holds very nice to the point that it feels like it was meant to really, that it was built for the Switch 2 primarily, a perfect fit, so to speak. Which, talking about ergonomics, and probably one of the most divisive aspect of the Abxylute S9 before it. Personally, I love the ergonomics of the Abxylute S9, but it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. It's kind of flatter and wider. And one thing that maybe some people will be happy to know is we have something completely different here. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it is like an Xbox controller, but we are more in that kind of DNA. And also, if you're familiar with the Galileo G8 or G8 Plus, it's kind of that, but on a smaller form factor. Well, I say smaller, it makes it sound as if it's being dwarfed next to Galileo, which is not the case. It's a similar kind of feel, but just slimmer everywhere. On how much the grip are pronounced, on how wide they are, on how thick they are. It feels smaller, but very much alike a Galileo G8 and G8 Plus in terms of ergonomics. In the document that they sent me, they say that it supports up to 8.8 inch. And I have here the Red Magic Astra, and also that's one of the benefits, especially for the Astra, because the USB-C is not, it's off-centered, and the power button is right on the other side. And so oftentimes if you have a controller that you plug into the USB-C, it might push on the connector like it did just now. So with a controller like this one, I can just push it up, no issues whatsoever. I want to boot in the PS mode, so I can hold B and home. So I'm going to hold B, hold home for a couple of seconds so that it puts into pairing. There you go, it starts flashing, and voila. And so just like that, I am now paired with the Red Magic Astra, so that holds very nicely. And also, if I wanted to use it in the other orientation, the port, well, maybe not now because it doesn't close well, but logically and technically, I could absolutely do that. So you'll have to, I'm sorry, Abxylute, I was making tests. I won't do it with the final retail unit, but at least now people know, don't do that. Now, because this is Bluetooth and because you have like infinite compatibility, we can go and play something like Call of Duty. And that's definitely going to be one of the benefits that you'll have, especially when working with Android with this controller. You have everything you might need: X input, the input, which is Android HID, the Nintendo Switch mode, the PS mode. So you have absolutely everything. I'm going to do a quick Call of Duty match to show you guys. Oh no. This is an ongoing match. Oh wait, this is not what I thought. Now, I don't know which revision of Bluetooth that it is. I couldn't find that information in their specs. I'm hoping it's 5.3 because 5.3 in my experience has just been better with latency and interference and speed in general. So hopefully that's what it is. It feels decent. I mean, look, if I had the option, would I prefer to go wired? 100%. But the fact that you have just everything, it's impossible to run into something that will not work. And that's the key benefit here. I'm sucking hard. Yeah, I redeemed myself with a triple kill. For the second that it lasted. The app. I don't think I have it installed on this tablet, so we'll go ahead and do that. Much like the Abxylute S9, you'll notice that if you're trying to connect, it'll have a secondary Bluetooth mode, and that'll be used to navigate the settings of the controller. So if I try to push here, it'll try to look for something. I'll say yes, and then it sees it. Well, it says that it's going to see it now, and indeed it's right here, so I have to connect. Pair. And now that should push me into the controller's settings. Now, if you're not familiar with the Abxylute app, you have a UI essentially to pick up your games and stuff like that. But let's really focus on what customization that the controller provides. And one of the things that you can do, of course, is remapping your layout. So if you want to go for the Nintendo Switch layout, you can do that. And when you're on the Nintendo Switch mode, it's gonna default to that. The glyph, though, they are standard size. And then you can also do your back paddles. You can do macros or you can do buttons. But this is also something that you can do with shortcuts. So for example, right now, if I push, it does my A button. But if I hold M and hold the back button, so I'm going to hold it, and you'll see that the light here is going to flash. And I'm going to do B and push the back button again. You'll notice that now it does B. So if you don't want to grab the app, or if you're in the middle of a game and you want to change on the fly, you can do that. And all the same, if I hold the M button and hold the back button, and this time we're going to do a macro. So I'm going to do A, B, and push it. You'll notice that now it'll repeat the macros. You either have the option to use the app, which of course is quite intuitive. You can also wipe it altogether by pushing the reset in the app. Or you can also hold M, make it flash. And rather than pushing a button, you just push your back paddles again. And that will remove any previous mapping that you have. When I originally reviewed the S9, I mentioned how I thought it was unfortunate that we could not choose our axis for the gyro, and this is something seemingly that they've addressed and I think is phenomenal. So you can now have the option to have the Z axis and Y axis. And to put things in perspective, the tilt is always up and down when it comes to gyro, but some games will prefer to use what I believe to be the Y axis, which is yaw, or the Z axis, which is rotate. And so when you have both, it's easier to aim, in my opinion, especially when using first-person shooters. But if you just want the Z axis, say you're playing a racing game, you can do that. If you just want the Y axis, you can do that as well. So you have the option, and you also have button specific to trigger it. You can address the sensitivity in the dead zone. So that's something I'm happy to see that they've improved on, and something that we can do as well with the S8. You can address also the stick dead zone, the trigger dead zone, And if you want to address your curves, you have some presets. As far as I can understand, you don't have your own custom one that you could build yourself. So you have to work with what is already given in the app. But you can also do left stick and right stick independently. And then you have info, firmware, and all the good stuff. You have your calibration and your testing as well. So if you want to recalibrate your sticks, your triggers, and gyro, I think. Oh, well, that feature is not yet there. But technically, it should probably be stick, triggers, and gyro that will be able to calibrate. And possibly we'll have a shortcut on the controller. I think it was the case with the S9. Yeah, home, start, and RB. I don't know. Let's try it. Home, start, RB. Oh. Okay, I think I have to push A. I'm pretty sure I did a calibration, but I can't confirm at this point in time. But yeah, it seems that it was just using the same shortcut. Let's try another game. By the way, if you're buying this specifically for the Switch 2, you may want to know that they're also working on two other accessories, the NS6 and the NS9. I hope at least that one of the two has a HD rumble solution. We'll find that out when that releases. My understanding is that they're working on having prototypes ready for people to be able to, to have people to be able to, review them like I'm doing right now with the S8, or at least have first impressions is what I should say rather. Yeah, I'm getting torched here. I'm usually a little better than that, I promise. No, right now I'm just I'm making a fool of myself. Yeah, this guy's toying with me. I got obliterated on this one, and even though it's not gonna fit on every iPads, it's definitely gonna work with iPhones. I will show you guys with the iPad in portrait orientation. So let me go ahead and swap this real quick. The one issue that I have is that I'm extremely limited in terms of games that I would be able to use with that orientation, because by default that's just not something that is pretty much feasible. But if you wanted to do that, this is an iPad Pro 13. I guess you could, and I'm at the very limit of how much I can stretch this controller. It wouldn't go a smidge further. So while you could do it, you might struggle to do it with every title. With an iPad, you would absolutely be fine with an iPad mini. However, to close it, you want to hold home. I do wish that they would make this delay shorter. Like 10 seconds is way too aggressive. Like 5 seconds would be more than enough. I believe for the X input mode, it's X and home. So we're going to hold X and home, and the light should be blue. So again, we want to hold it to put it into pairing. There you go. Now I have a fairly bulky case. It holds well, nonetheless. If I was to shake it, it probably would fall. But as far as just like playing like that, even if I try to have the camera bulge go down, it holds nice as long as I don't open it in any capacity. Far are the days where you could have pretty much little to no option wired on iOS devices that are USB-C. Thankfully, that has been addressed over time. While I still would expect a better experience, especially in terms of latency with a wired option, again, in terms of compatibility, you're not going to have an issue here. However, with that in mind, with iOS devices being a lot more friendly to even non-licensed controllers that are wired mainly because they're spoofing other popular controllers such as a PlayStation controller or an Xbox controller, I feel like on iOS, you're not going to run into that compatibility issue. So it may be harder to justify this controller, specifically because what happens on iOS, and I've had more and more people tell me about this, where controllers that used to work seems to not work anymore or not work as well. And that's something I had observed before, but it seems like Apple may have made some recent changes where even though it's going to go through, there's going to be a little bit of an input delay due to probably Apple not recognizing or thinking something is off with the controller, but it still lets it through because it still appears as if it's a PlayStation controller, even though it's not. So I do think that this is potentially an issue that Apple is trying to crack on. I'm not 100%. Of course, this is just guesstimation on my part. Based off of what some people have been telling me, I'm getting the feeling that this might be happening more and more. And so I think this controller, the Abxylute S8, is one I'd recommend definitely more for the Switch 2 or Android. Less so on iOS. On iOS, I would probably recommend that you get something wired, like properly wired, so that you don't have that issue with the delay that seems to happen, specifically impacting the latency. Whereas on Android and on other devices, that doesn't seem to be a problem. And back to what we were saying earlier, if I wanted to use that on my PC wired where I'll get the best experience, I could also do that using the USB-C connector that's right here. I am excited to have the retail unit to see how they've improved it. The thing is, depending on what you want, and probably the one thing that I haven't really spent too much time talking about is the price. All things considered, yes, you have a lot of different options, some that are arguably better, but you're also going to pay a pretty hefty sum. This one is extremely compatible, and that's for sure one of the greater benefits that it has over many of its competitors. Something that you won't be missing out if you're going with this controller. Like, there's nothing you're not going to be able to do. You're going to be able to do remote play because you have the PS mode. You're going to be able to play Call of Duty because you have both the X input and PS mode. You're going to be able to have Switch mode if ever you play a game that has gyro that needs it, or just to play on your Switch directly, Switch 1, Switch 2. So, you know, there's really nothing you're not going to be able to do. But if you're trying to like go competitive, this may not be my number one recommendation. It's going to come down to what your primary goals are. Boot back into the PS mode where I was connected with the Astra. And as you can see here, I don't need to, do the pairing because it will remember each of the different pairings that you have. So that's nice. So if I was, for example, to pop out my Switch 2, and man, I hate waiting for this thing. It's too long. If I do Y and I do home, without needing to pair again, I can go now on my Switch 2. So that's also a nice touch that they're not using the same pairing protocol for each of the modes. Each mode have their independent memory, so to speak, of their previous device connected. So that's another thing that I like with having X input and PS mode is they're both going to work on Android, they're both going to work on iOS, but this way I can use like one mode to be iOS specific. For example, X input, it's just going to work everywhere on iOS, whereas PS mode I find is a little more compatible as a whole on Android. That's when you launch it. When you try to launch a game, you're going to have the mapping option come up. And if we confirm, oh yeah, go to enable first so that I can go over the apps. We'll skip the tutorial. And I just want to show you guys what it looks like. So now you have this little button here and I can click on it and that'll give me a bunch of different options. You can do your left stick, you can do your right stick. You have different settings. So here, view mode, we can adjust the swipe speed. For the left stick, we have direction mode. And then you can do your buttons. And I'm pretty sure you have the option to do it so that when you hold a button, it'll affect the stick dependently when holding that button, which is going to be the MOBA here. So for example, if whenever I push RB, it's going to have me be able to address that move while with the right stick while holding RB. So this is usually good for your MOBAs or things like Brawl, can't remember the name of the game. You can save your configuration, you can remove the mapping to be visible or not. That setting is here. Still works fine with this mode. So if you want to use screen mapping, you can do that as well. Of course, if you have a device, for example, like the Red Magic Astra, where you have a mapping solution integrated, you will still also be able to use the controller with that mapping, which I find they improved the mapping on the Abxylute. I still find that it feels a little bit bare bone in terms of settings, like for example, sensitivity or addressing the X and Y axis independently. You don't necessarily have a whole lot of things, but you do have some of it. As a whole, I think it's going to be a very versatile controller that may get a better reception than the S9, which I think the S9 did great. To this day, it's still one of the most compatible options in the market. To me, the Rumble is it's a substantial enough step back. especially that it's being marketed primarily, not exclusively, but primarily for the Switch 2. It's something to consider. If you don't care for rumble, it's not going to be an issue, but if you do, that is definitely a sacrifice you'll be making for the sake of having what I still consider to be better ergonomics as a whole. Quite light, all things considered. It also holds well on the device that it's connected to. I like it. I'm looking forward to seeing the changes that are in the final version. I definitely still think it warrants a pre-order. Oh, and last thing before we end this video. So it's so easy to move that it made it seem as if there was another issue with the D-pad. It's not so much an issue, it's that it gets quite sensitive, especially if you push hard on your buttons. But I'm pushing extra hard right now. Overall, I don't think there's an issue. Is it my favorite feeling D-pad? No, I think that's a step back from the Abxylute S9. But they didn't call this the Abxylute S10. They called it the Abxylute S8. And so I understand that there are some steps back, especially to hit a pretty phenomenal price point as they have. So that's another benefit. And they still added a battery on that thing. So, you know, that's gotta bring the cost up a fair amount. Looking forward to seeing the final product. Let me know if you have any thoughts, any questions that I could cover in the final review. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.